Hello, welcome to Context. I'm Nadia Jani. For the first time, Israeli tanks have pushed into southern and eastern districts of the Gazan city of Deir Balahon Monda. It's an area where Israeli sources say hostages may be held. The area is occupied with Palestinians displaced during more than 21 months of war in Gaza, hundreds of whom fled west or south after Israel issued an evacuation order, saying it sought to destroy infrastructure and capabilities of the militant group Hamas. The World Health Organization said its staff residence and main warehouse in Deir Balah was attacked on Monday. 25 countries have released a joint statement calling for the immediate end of the war in Gaza and accusing Israel of not allowing sufficient aid in, demanding it must do so to comply with international humanitarian law. Israeli sources have said the reason the army had stayed out of Deir Balah districts was because they suspected Hamas might be holding hostages there. At least 20 of the remaining 50 hostages in captivity in Gaza are believed to be still alive. Families of the hostages have expressed concern for their relatives and demanded an explanation from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Israel Katz, and the army chief on how they will protect them. Today, I'm joined by Ilan Seyalom, and a geopolitical analyst from Paris, and Imam Marwin Gil, president of our media Muslim community in Argentina. Ilan, hello and welcome. My first question is to you. The news that Israel military has gone into that area, into Deir Balah, to get what they presume are hostages. What do you think of that? Do you think they will find the hostages there?
Thank you for your question. Just to give some elements in the background, Deir Balah has been relatively untouched throughout the war, especially compared to the north of Gaza and Rafah and Han Yunis in the south. So this relative quiet made it a likely stronghold for the Hamas, a zone where its fighters, its infrastructure and hostages could be hidden. This is, to be clear, one of the last group remaining bastions. In the past, rescue operations have already led to the recovery of hostages in the central camps, including Nuseirat, close to Deir al-Balah. So the current operation suggests that the Israeli army is acting on concrete intelligence. Whether they will find hostages is still uncertain, but this is clearly not a symbolic offensive. It reflects a shift from large-scale military campaigns to high-precision rescue efforts, and indicates we are likely in the final phase of the war.
I see. And do you think that Netanyahu would be able to bring back all these hostages? As some would argue, that has not been his primary focus.
Very, very good question. I think that we can say that in its history, Israel has always made the return of hostages, dead or alive, a national priority. The case of Gilad Shalit, who has been prisoner for 6 years in the Gaza Strip and exchanged for over 1,000 prisoners, is a powerful historical precedent. So as you know, since October 7, there have been several negotiation rounds in Doha, in Qatar, but these efforts, and this is my opinion, these efforts often served more as a political instrument than a true strategic end, allowing the Prime Minister Netanyahu to appear engaged while avoiding concessions that might fracture his coalition. Internally, he's been pulled in opposite directions by the growing and legitimate pressure from the families of the hostages and by far-right coalition partners who oppose any ceasefire that might involve a deal with Hamas. So this tension has shaped Israel's hesitation. Only after severely degrading Hamas military and following the 12-day war against Iranian targets has Netanyahu begun to present the hostages as his main focus. But this prioritization at the end of the broader strategic sequence, not as its beginning. So given the current stalemate and the humanitarian costs, a negotiated ceasefire and hostage release may now be the only realistic path forward. Whether the political conditions are ripe on both sides remains the open question.
In that case, do you think a ceasefire agreement would help with hostage negotiations to bring them back home?
I think, as I say, now the price of the humanitarian situation and the current stalemate, it means that now the negotiated ceasefire and the hostage release, I think this is the only realistic path forward. But now the question is whether the political conditions are reunited on both sides, in Hamas and in Israel. This is an open question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Marwan Gil, I actually would want to ask you the next question. I mentioned earlier in the introduction that 25 countries are calling on an immediate, stop to the war in Gaza. And I just wanted to find out, what do you think of that? Do you think that will put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to end the conflict there?
I mean, it's very pathetic and very heartbreaking to see that almost 2 years into the conflict, and we have more than 50,000 plus, at least minimum, loss of innocent people who were killed. And the cruelties, the mass killing of innocent people in Gaza, and even such called safe zones where people are queuing up to just receive water, basic food, and humanitarian aid. Even in such safe zones, people are killed and targeted. On the other side, even in religious temples, as recently in the only church in Gaza, people are killed. And still, our world leaders are on the point of signing joint statements, urging, asking, declaring, expressing resolutions. And it's almost 2 years into the conflict, into this ongoing killing of innocent people. And it's not something what is hidden. Everyone can see it, it's open, it's evident. And I think it's very saddening and very heartbreaking and frustrating that the lack of commitment, and I think the passivity which our world leaders are showing and giving kind of this open hand to the Israeli government, it's making them complicit of what is happening, of these cruelties, of this injustices committed against the Palestinians. And in my case, as a representative of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, very soon after Israel launched their bombarding and invasion of Gaza, our worldwide caliph, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, globally launched the campaign as Voices for Peace. And for us, the primary step was an immediate, long-lasting ceasefire, because we believe, as Muslims and members of the Ahmadiyya community, Islam, which literally means peace, we believe that the only way to guarantee peace is by establishing universal principles of justice. And when we speak about principles of justice, in first point for us is to highlight the sanctity of human life. And when I say human life, it doesn't mean to give priority over one ethnicity group or over one collective group over the other. No, it needs to give the same sanctity, the same dignity to all human beings, and not make any difference based on creed, religion, or color. And sadly, what we see is that it shows us that almost we have no commitment, or the life of innocent Palestinians have no value. Millions of them have been killed. And the answer is only that it was a technical error, it was a logistical error, but it clearly gives us the doubt that it seems to be a moral error, that we don't have the same commitment and the same compassion with the innocent life of Palestinians. And just the last point, why I'm emphasizing so much on the sanctity of human life. In our case as Muslims, the Holy Quran states that whosoever killed one innocent human life is as if he would have killed all humanity. And on the other side, it states that whosoever saves even one innocent human life is as if he would have saved all human race or humanity. So I think this should be our priority, and this should be our ultimate goal, and especially the urgent need at this point.
Definitely. And what would you say is what would be the best next step in all of this? What would you actually, go for or want to really action in this particular conflict?
I mean, like in our case, the founder, not me speaking as a Muslim, Ahmadi Muslim, the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he stated that if your friend or your brother is committing, or he's the oppressor or the oppressed one, help him. So now it's obviously clear if he's the oppressed one, it means to help in, to step in, and to free him from the oppressions, from their cruelties. But the question was, his disciples asked him, but what do you mean helping the oppressor, the brother? And he said, help him by stopping him from committing injustice or cruelties and oppressions towards others. And I think the urgent need is that those who consider themselves friends, brothers, allies of Israel, they should step in, and rather than just signing declarations or resolutions or publications or verbal rhetoric, they should convert it into practical actions and step in, and especially for now, guarantee the sanctity of human lives, save the innocent life of Palestinians, and guarantee especially the humanitarian aid that it comes to the people. And obviously, for me, it's clear that this is the first step. On long term, it is also important to highlight that this war, this conflict has not started on the 7th of October. That's just a recent episode. It's a conflict which is now taking almost decades, and because of not establishing long lasting principles of justice, that's where it's leading us into a chaos, into a destabilized region, which is almost leading us to a world war. And that's the current affair. So I think what we need now is the commitment of our world leaders and convert their verbal rhetoric into actions. And obviously, on the other side, I would make the urgent call on one side, also on the Muslim leaders, that their silence is also making them complicit of what is happening to the Palestinians, and they need to show a joint, committed, strong point, and come on the table all together as a one stand, as a one opinion, and stop Israel from what is happening in Gaza. And on the other side, I think we have to obviously criticize what's happening with the United Nations as a very paralyzed institution, which has almost no authority and no action. And in this case, it's really for, I think, for common people, frustrating and disheartening to see what is happening, all the images and the ongoing slaughter and mass killing of innocent people in Gaza.
Yes, thank you for that. Ilan, actually, now I'll just go to you. There is a lot of pressure, I'm sure, on Netanyahu trying to, end the conflict, do something. And we've also had, as I mentioned, the 25 countries coming together. Pope Leo has also called for the end of the barbarity and for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think Israel will succumb to the pressure and actually want to stop what's going on in Gaza at the moment?
Well, if you mention Pope Leo appeal, it's less political than moral and symbolic. His call followed an Israeli strike that damaged Gaza only Catholic Church and killing civilians, including children with disabilities. But his message goes beyond that tragedy. It resonates with wider concerns about civilian protection and respect for sacred spaces. It also comes, and I think we need to say that, at a time when settler violence in the West Bank is making headlines, including attacks in the city of Taipei, one of the oldest Christian towns in the region. So the Pope is drawing attention to the erosion of moral and humanitarian norms, not just in Gaza, but across the Middle East. Israel has expressed regret for the church incident and pledged an investigation. But more than apologize, responding seriously to the Pope message would send a strong signal that Israel distinguishes between its war against Hamas and its obligation to protect civilians and religious minorities.
Yeah, and I think, Ilan, on that, obviously we've seen it all come out in regards to what's happened over in the Catholic Church and the dealings with people getting aid into Gaza. My other question would be in regards to, obviously the hostages is the main priority. If Israel was to get its hostages back, do you think that would bring an end to the war in Gaza?
Let's be clear, recovering the hostages will be a pivotal moment, but not necessarily the end. There remains a deep strategic and political divide within Israel leadership. While some view the hostage release as a closing chapter, others, particularly on Netanyahu rights, insist the war must continue until Hamas is eradicated completely, not only as a military force, but also as a governing structure. So there are still unresolved debates whether to expand Israel's hold on Gaza, to create buffer zones, or to implement controversial plans like the humanitarian city project. So these ideas reflect a broader ambition that goes far beyond the hostage crisis. So even if all hostages were returned, Netanyahu may still face internal pressure to extend military operations, not necessarily because of urgent security needs, but to fulfill the broader expectation of his coalition. That's why the end of the hostage chapter may not mean the end of the war unless a political decision is made to define and accept a clear exit strategy in Israel.
That's really interesting. So in that case, what do you think now needs to happen in order for the hostages to be returned and for things to, for the starvation to end, for those to get the humanitarian aid that is desperately needed in Gaza? What steps need to happen?
Well, this is what we are seeing now. There are still negotiations for a ceasefire and the return of the hostages, but at the same time, we have, as I say, internal pressure for Netanyahu, both in the far right and even within the Israeli army, saying that now they are controlling 75% of the Gaza Strip, so putting more pressure on Hamas, on the last bastion in Deir al-Balah. So my point now, I think, is to they will continue to put pressure, military pressure, till Hamas agreed to release hostages and then arrive to a ceasefire. But as I say, this is not a clear exit strategy. After that, we will still need a clear plan to exit Gaza influence, Hamas influence in Gaza Strip, and at the same time to have new political option to manage and to rule the Gaza Strip. And now, in this situation, we need the help of different countries, for sure, United States, European Union, and as well Arab countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and others.
Okay. Imam Marwan Gil, I was going to ask, as the president, obviously, of the Armenian Muslim community, what are your hopes for the Palestinian people?
I hope that finally, after such a long tragedy and suffering, finally they can live as well in peace and have the same dignity and the same basic human rights which all of us deserve, independently of our creed, of ethnicity, or of our religion. But unfortunately, I think many times when we analyze the conflict in the Middle East and now in Gaza, it is important to highlight that this war, or on the 6th or the 5th of October 2023, it was not that there was a peaceful, harmonious coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians. This conflict is taking far too long and has gone far beyond. And sadly, unfortunately, we have to say that we don't see the commitment, we don't see that the world community or the international community has been successful in implementing with political agreements to resolve this issue. I mean, like the Palestinian cause, it's taking now decades. And even before the 7th of October, many prestigious humanitarian international organizations like Amnesty, like Human Rights Watch, they used to speak about an open-air prison. And what we see now has gone far beyond. It's an open-air cemetery, it's an open-air hell, where people are targeted, innocent people killed, and their life has no value. And still, it's so sad to see that our world leaders are still not coming and not intervening. And I think by allowing this, and it's not just Gaza, what we see also violating international laws, like we see or we have seen in the past, that Israel also killed or civilians or attacked even and violated the sovereignty of other countries, like in Syria, like in Iran. If this sums up, finally it will lead to a world war, and this summing up of acts of injustice will finally lead us to a major crisis. And I think that's where it's important to maintain the coherence and maintain our commitment towards justice. Because if it's wrong to attack civilians in one country, then it should be a universal law and a universal principle where we should defend everywhere the same rights and the same dignity for everyone.
In that sense, do you think that the end goal or the solution to this could be a two-state solution that has been, discussed back and forth between a number of different countries?
I mean, it could be two or one, but for me, I think the final solution is that unless we don't guarantee the same rights for everyone, independently of their creed, of their color, of their ethnicity, there will be no peace. So it's just a verbal rhetoric if we speak about peace, but at the end, we don't want to establish universal principles of justice. And in this case, I think it's very important to highlight that when we speak especially about Hamas and these groups, for me, they are not the root cause of this conflict. They are symptoms of this disease, of this illness. They have arisen as a consequence of the failure, because the deep cause is, for me, that our world community has not resolved the pending issues, and they have not established principles of justice. And many times we believe that simply we can provide military solutions or innovate countries, but it's not that simple. We have seen this as well in Afghanistan with the Taliban. We have seen this in Iraq with Saddam Hussein, with Gaddafi and Libya, in Syria, by bombarding just the infrastructure of a country. Even now, recently, the attacks on Iran, by just bombarding the infrastructure, the civilians or the people, you're not going to resolve anything. The group, as a result, who will come into existence, they will be even worse. They will be even more extreme, more radical. So we need political or solutions on the table. And this requires that you establish universal principles of justice. And the Quran is very clear about this. And it states that even the enmity towards a people should not deprive you of justice. So I think that's why it's very important and urgent that when we speak about peace, to back up our desires of peace by actions of justice. And that's for us very important at that moment, in this moment, very moment. I'm here in the UK where we're going to gather together for the International Convention of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. From all across the world, people and representatives and members are going to come together. And for us, it's important because we will, in the next few days, get together and pray for the peace in the world. And because we believe as Muslims that the lack of peace in your soul, in your mind, in your heart, finally is reflected then in the absence of peace in our environment, in our societies, and in our international political affairs.
Thank you, Marwin. Thank you for that. Ilan, this is my last question, which I directed to you. If Netanyahu doesn't return hostages back, do you think that could be the end of his political career?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Prime Minister Netanyahu is a phoenix. He's been since 20 years a national leader in Israel. Since the October 7, he put a lot of pressure in defining war goal by eradicating Hamas. He's making so. Hamas is very, very weak today, not eradicated, but very weak. His image was very bad after October 7th. So it will be elections in Israel in October. So it will be a good test for him, and I think that it's not the end of the political career of Netanyahu.
Okay. Thank you both for joining me today on Context. Your contribution has been well received. Thank you. Well, that's all for the episode today. I'm Nadia Jani. Keep and stay tuned to A News.